everyone. I'm Nancy Maloney, President of the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County, and I'm very happy to welcome you tonight, those of you who are here and those of you on Zoom. I'm As many, and I dare say most of you know, that the right to vote was not the only thing that concerned the founders of the League of Women Voters. From the beginning, they realized that there were issues concerning women that needed to be addressed. They knew from experience the power of that lay in the fact that they were a grassroots, nonpartisan group who could speak for their community, and that they did. In fact, while the League was formed in 1920, it was by 1921 it saw its first legislative success with the passage of the National Maternity and Infancy Protection Act, which provided federal funds for maternity and maternal and infant health care. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, meaning that we neither support nor oppose those to our we either support or oppose individual campaigns or political parties.
Is not to convert voters to our way of thinking, but to empower them through educational programming that addresses current issues in a straightforward and factual way. Which brings us here tonight. This evening's program, the first in a series concerning reproductive health care, is the result of the work of the Reproductive Rights Committee of the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County. They have brought together this evening a panel to address the myths about abortion care. Charlie?
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. I'm Charlie Gabler. I'm tonight's moderator. I'm just gonna get this to the right side. Lift it up. And I may need numbers. Okay. I am very technologically challenged. This will be okay. Okie doke. So I'll restart. Good evening. I'm Charlie Gabler, tonight's moderator. And I want to echo Nancy's welcome to all of you to the Milwaukee County's Reproductive Rights Committee's first public issue forum. Fact or fiction, dispelling abortion care myths. Tonight's forum was prompted by an anti-abortion door hanger left at one of our committee members' house or home. As a group, we realized since Roe, disinformation had been used to cloud and confuse the conversation around abortion care. Being able to recognize and effectively address these myths is an important strategy in advocating for the necessity for all women to have access to abortion care. Tonight, we hope all of you will become more confident in having conversations that lead to abortion care myth busting, be it in your one-to-one conversations with friends and families, or in your communication with elected officials. We are fortunate to have the Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin's advocacy team join us. Their mission dovetails perfectly with the goals of our forum. Unfortunately, one of their team members, Michelle Velasquez, Chief Strategy Officer and Acting Director of Legal Advocacy Services and Compliance of Planned Parenthood and Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin, is unable to attend in person. this evening. But one of her team members, Dr. Allie Linton, the Chief Medical Officer for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, who is very familiar with Michelle's presentation, will present her material, and Michelle will then join us via Zoom during the general question and answer time at the end of the forum. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping details. If we were using just the external camera, we were going to need to ask our in-room participants to be as quiet as possible, so the mic would pick up the speakers' voices and not yours. For those attending in person, you can see we have 3x5 cards on the table with also pens. And what we would like you to do is please write down questions prompted by the presentations. Members of our committee will be circulating and collecting your questions throughout each presentation. Those on Zoom are, please place your questions in the chat. Your questions will be compiled and added to those in the room. Immediately post Dr. Linton's and Tia Reiner's presentations, we will address 1 to 2 questions. Questions by Dr. Werner, Michelle Velasquez, and those not previously answered will be addressed at the end of the meeting during the general questions and answers. The presentations will take likely between 60 to 75 minutes total. So those of you not familiar with the Summit Building, restrooms are to the left as you exit the conference room. If you get to the elevators, you've gone too far. We know abortion care is a very personal decision and can provoke strong emotions. So we please ask everyone to be respectful to all opinions expressed this evening. As Nancy nicely identified, giving women a voice in democracy and public policy is at the core of the League of Women Voters. It only seemed fitting to start tonight's forum by giving voice to a woman who has experienced a complex pregnancy that highlights the nuances and the difficulties women and their families face when limits on abortion care are in place. Dr. Helen Werner is an assistant professor of biology at Beloit College, where she teaches anatomy and physiology while maintaining a robust bioarchaeological scholarship. In 2019, Dr. Werner completed her PhD in anthropology from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and holds a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Werner routinely gives voice to the impact of abortion care limits by testifying in front of for the legislation, writing on her experience, and via her nonprofit Marigold Foundation. She founded the Marigold Foundation in 2019 in memory of her twin sons, Theodore and Holden, who died after their premature birth. Her foundation aims to help southwestern Wisconsin families affected by negative birth outcomes or who are currently facing a medically complex pregnancy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Werner, and I'd like to personally thank you for your courage and your willingness to share.
Thank you all very much, and thank you to the organizers of this for asking me to speak here tonight. My name is Helen Werner, and like Charlie introduced me, I'm an assistant professor of biology at Beloit College. But in 2016, I was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where I was working on my PhD in anthropology. In June of that year, I found out that I was pregnant. My husband, Zach, and I had a 2-year-old son, William, at home, and we were excited to welcome another baby to our family. Finding out that I was pregnant was a bit of a surprise, but it was an even bigger surprise when I found out during a scan in August that I was having identical twin boys. My first words upon finding out were not suitable for this venue. We were excited, and despite learning that identical twins have an increased risk for certain complications, I went into the fall semester mostly concerned with how their birth would impact my ability to work and how we would fit 2 new babies into one small house. It was in late September 2016 where everything suddenly changed. I went to a routine appointment and was told that something was wrong with one of the babies. I was already 18 weeks along and we had started working on the nursery. Just the week prior, I had gone with my mom and sister to a Moms of Multiple sale, and we had loaded up my sister's minivan with a double stroller and lots of matching onesies. We went through a week and a half of worry and testing before finally being told that my twins most likely had twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. The closest hospital that could treat TTTS with surgery was in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we went to Ohio. We packed William off to stay with my parents, and my husband and I drove the 8 hours from Madison to Cincinnati. At the end of the day, on October 4th, after a full day of testing, we were told that yes, our twins did indeed have TTTS, and yes, I would need surgery. My cervix was looking slightly funneled, but they gave me a vaginal progesterone suppository and sent us back home, back to the hotel, to rest for the night. On the morning of October 5th, I woke up in labor. When I got to labor and delivery at the University of Cincinnati Hospital, they checked me and found that my cervix was 3.5 to 4 centimeters dilated and my bag of waters was bulging. I was admitted and was started on drugs to hopefully slow my labor. The problem was that even with my labor slowed, my twins were continuing to worsen. And in my current state, I was no longer a candidate for the surgery that could potentially save them. One of the physicians, a resident, sat by my bedside and patiently answered my questions. I finally asked him, what are the odds that if you do everything you possibly can, that my twins will survive? And he answered that there was a 90% chance that they would both die. With surgery no off the table, the TTTS would only continue to worsen. We decided to stop the treatment that was stalling my labor. The idea of being stuck in a hospital bed for weeks, just waiting for them to die, hundreds of miles away from my family and our toddler, felt like torture. This was when I was told by the doctors that given Ohio law at the time, they wouldn't be able to move my labor along with medical means, as that would be akin to second trimester abortion. Just 2 years previously, my cousin lost her beautiful daughter at 21 weeks, and I knew that she'd been given Pitocin at some point in order to speed things along. That's okay, I thought. My labor with William had only lasted 3 hours and 42 minutes, so I know that once I stopped the IV drugs, that it wouldn't take me that long for my cervix to dilate enough to birth 20-week infants. It wasn't until later that night that I realized what this actually meant for me. Ohio state law, section 2919.151, titled Partial Birth Feticide, states that when the fetus that is the subject of the procedure is not viable, no person shall knowingly perform a partial birth procedure on a pregnant woman when the procedure is not necessary in reasonable medical judgment to preserve the life or health of the mother as a result of the mother's life or health being endangered by a serious risk of the substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function. Well, what this meant for me was that they couldn't deliver them until 2 doctors signed a form saying that my life was justifiably in danger. But when there were no breaks in my contractions, when I got an epidural and IV narcotics, I still couldn't understand why they weren't delivering them. Every once in a while, an ultrasound technician would come in my room and check on the babies, noting that they were continuing to decline. At 11 p.m., they checked my progress and noted that there was a leak now in my amniotic sac. Still, I waited. Something must have changed during the night, because in the morning when I woke up after a few hours of rest, they checked me again and decided that I was suitably at risk, that they could justify delivering my twins. 2 nurses came in with 2 isolettes. The doctors started draping my legs and putting on gowns. Theodore Nicholas Werner was born at 8:48 a.m. on October 6, 2016. He was beautiful and had a small patch of dark hair. The attending physician wiped the tears from my eyes as I held Theodore to my chest. He lived for 30 minutes. My cervix closed briefly after I delivered Theodore, and so the doctors gave us a few minutes to be with him before delivering his brother. Suddenly, though, my husband looked startled and pointed at my bedsheet, where blood was now visibly soaking through it. Holden Benjamin Werner was stillborn at 9:17 a.m. My bed was immediately tilted backwards, and they got to work to staunch the bleeding. In a cruel twist of fate, or twist of legislation, Theodore was given a birth and a death certificate, but Holden wasn't. He was stillborn, and so while he was protected inside of me, so protected that even though we knew he was going to die, my own life was put at risk on the smallest chance he could survive. Once he was born dead, he no longer qualified for a birth certificate or social security number, or all the mundane little things that signify personhood in our culture, the things that his identical twin brother had. Losing my babies was terrible. It still is. Reliving the moments of being told that they wouldn't survive, of seeing their tiny bodies wearing matching blue hats, these things gut me. But the things that have contributed to complex grief and PTSD are the memories of wondering where the doctors were and not knowing why someone wasn't coming in to help me, of blood soaking through the sheet and being abruptly tilted backwards. Maybe I was always going to have to bury my second and third sons, but I don't think it was inevitable that I suffered while in labor with them. Amen. That was a choice that was made by someone, and that someone was not me and was not my physician. Thank you for listening and for considering the implications of my story. It's an honor to be here tonight. In 2017, we had another child, another boy, Hugo, and our living children help us remember our deceased ones. In 2019, Zach and I founded the Marigold Foundation. The marigold is the birth flower for October and a symbol of remembrance, to help families in southwestern Wisconsin pay medical bills after they have lost a pregnancy or an infant. Thank you. Thank you very much for the moving story. Dr. Allie Linton completed medical school and obstetrics and gynecology residency, followed by a 2-year complex family planning fellowship and a master's of public health at Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine in Chicago. After finishing her training, she was recruited to Milwaukee as a generalist obstetrician and gynecologist with a focus on planning. She is the Chief Medical Officer of Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, as previously mentioned, and she will be presenting Michelle's presentation, and then after she completes that presentation, she will follow with her own presentation. So please welcome Dr. Linton.
Thank you. I just want to pause for one more second and just thank Helen so much. That was a really, really powerful story. And yeah, that I feel weird sort of switching so quickly, and I just want to acknowledge that for one more minute. So thank you very much. Thank you. So as Charlie was mentioning, I am representing both myself and also Michelle Velasquez today. So I want to preface this, I am not a lawyer. I have been honored though to be able to attend a lot of Michelle's presentations on these on this subject though. So I'm gonna do my best to pretend that I am one for the next little bit here. And we will have an opportunity for questions. I know Michelle is on the Zoom, and so I want to make sure that if I am not able to answer it in a very legally accurate way, that we are getting you the question or the answers to your questions that are legally accurate. So Michelle Velasquez, we're going to be talking about the abortion access legal landscape post Dobbs. So as a disclaimer, I am going to say this on her behalf as well. This presentation is intended to be educational. This is not meant to be legal advice in any way. There is pending litigation in Wisconsin and around the country. So everything that we talk about today, as I'm sure you've noticed over the last 1.5 years or 2 years, it is constantly in flux. So what is true in this moment, in this minute, might be completely different tomorrow. And it also is very dependent on where you are. And many of the questions of law resulting from the decision of Dobbs v. Jackson from last year are yet to be tested. So a lot of what we're trying to figure out right now are what are the answers. We don't have a lot of prior law to look back on and to help guide us in these moments. So abortion access in Wisconsin post-Dobbs. So there's always been this question, if you've heard of 94004, or what some people are referring to as a criminal abortion ban. Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin has always held that this law did not spring back to life after the Dobbs decision in June of last year. That said, because of the uncertainty and because of the consequences of this law, specifically a felony charge for a provider or physician who provides abortion services, 6 years in prison, $10,000 fine, and also a 6-year statute of limitations, we made the decision at the time of the Dobbs decision that we would suspend services at our Water Street location here in Milwaukee, as well as at our Madison East location and our Sheboygan location here in Wisconsin. All of the rest of our Planned Parenthood centers have remained open and providing family planning services, but we suspended abortion services. And that was true across the state. So the other freestanding clinic that provided free abortion services before the Dobbs decision also stopped providing, as well as all of the hospital-based procedures, with a very narrow exception. 94004 has an exception, and this is the actual word: an abortion performed by a physician if necessary or advised by 2 other physicians as necessary to save the life of the pregnant patient. So the only abortions that have been occurring in Wisconsin after Dobbs until most recently have been when there is felt to be a direct threat to maternal life. Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin partnered with Planned Parenthood of Illinois. Several of us traveled down to Waukegan to provide services there during the 449 days that we had suspended services, but we were not providing here in the state. There are 2 paths to sort of restoring abortion access in Wisconsin. One of them is legislative and the other is judicial. For those of you that know a lot about our Wisconsin makeup, legislative is not a super tenable approach in this moment. So what we've been focusing primarily on is the judicial. So the legal path forward, the idea is first to restore, then to protect, and then to expand when we're thinking about abortion access. So the first step in this is the restore. So right after the Dobbs decision came down, Attorney Josh Call filed a suit asking for relief and further guidance to say that 94004, that criminal abortion ban, was not enforceable. This was really considered a first step, but it's really important to realize this does not protect access long-term. This is really just sort of the goal of this would be getting us back to where we were in June of last year. That's definitely susceptible to legislative efforts, and remembering that any new law that could be passed could potentially undermine whatever we do have a final ruling in this Josh Call lawsuit. So looking forward, the goal would be to then protect abortion as an act, as a right. So trying to figure out if there's a way that we can put abortion into our constitution in the state of Wisconsin, as I'm sure you might have been seeing in other states. That would be the next step. Seeing if we could get legislative protection. Again, there's a question of whether that is tenable at this time. And then looking at whether we could have a constitutional amendment. And then lastly, promoting access at sort of the expansion is trying to remove some of the barriers that we already have on the books. Even prior to Dobbs, Wisconsin was considered one of the most restrictive states in the country when it comes to abortion legislation. I can name a lot of the different laws that we have, but some of the big ones: we have a 24-hour waiting period, we have parental consent laws, we have mandatory ultrasound laws, we have a ban on any use of telemedicine when it comes to abortion services. And we also have a law that stipulates that for medication abortion specifically, you have to see the same physician. All of these things greatly decrease access. So even before Dobbs, we had all of these restrictions in place. So a goal moving forward is to try to expand access by removing some of those barriers. So with restoring access, again, Josh Call filed the lawsuit in Dane County. The basic ask of the lawsuit is to try to say, is 94004 enforceable? Giving us that additional protection to say, no, we've never felt it's enforceable, but can you give us additional guidance to say that we are correct in our opinion? On July 7th, 2023, The judge in this case out of Dane County dismissed a plaintiff's claim on the idea that 94004 prohibits abortion. So we do not have a final decision in this ruling. That's really important. But when the judge issued this ruling on July 7th, specifically when one of the plaintiffs, when one of the defendants, Ermansky, who is one of the district attorney out of Sheboygan, they had filed a motion to dismiss the case. And in the July 7th ruling, they said, no, we are not going to dismiss this case. But part of their discussion on the July 7th ruling was that this law does not apply to consensual abortion. They said that this law really it's talking about feticide. It's something different. So this judge does not feel that this applies to consensual abortion. And actually there is additional sort of wording about this, trying to remove any discussion of consensual abortion from this law. So even though we don't have a final ruling in this Josh Paul lawsuit, Planned Parenthood felt that we had the evidence that we needed to say that this is not a law about abortion, about consensual abortion, and therefore we resumed services on September 18th of this year. And again, just emphasizing that there's no criminal abortion ban in Wisconsin, and this at least preliminary discussion about the law led us to feel comfortable that we could resume services. Protecting access, looking at this constitutional right, I'm not going to go through all of the different states here, but there are different ways that states have approached this. Whether you're trying to add it to your, to say there's a constitutional right and actually creating an amendment, various ways of approaching it from an equal protection clause, or trying to sort of clarify the different wording that states have about preservation of maternal life. What are the exceptions? What are the times that you can provide abortion care? But protecting access is definitely going to be the next prong of this three-prong approach, at least first restoring, then protecting, and then eventually expanding access. And then finally, expanding access. So Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin had actually filed a federal lawsuit in 2019 challenging the physician-only law that we have here in Wisconsin, the ban on telemedicine, and the need to have the same physician for medication abortion. The whole case went through. We were waiting for a decision, and then Dobbs happened. And so they actually dismissed that case without giving us an answer for which way they were going to rule. So obviously our goal is to try to bring this issue up again now that we've restored access and try to improve access to patients. As we all know, saying that something is legal does not mean that it's accessible. So again, even before Dobbs, there were only 3.5 centers in the state of Wisconsin. I say a half because one of our centers only provided medication abortion. Now one of those freestanding centers has permanently shut. So our best case scenario at this time would be that we would have 2.5 centers in the entire state of Wisconsin to provide abortion care. And finally, the protecting access. So again, this sort of goes back to the idea of adding initiatives to the ballot. If you all know, and Michelle would be able to say this much better than I do, but the idea of adding a ballot initiative is really tricky in the state of Wisconsin. You have to have a certain number of legislators that agree to it, and it has to pass 2 separate sessions. So unlike places in Ohio, which you might have seen last week, where they all voted to add a constitutional protection to abortion care, that is something that's going to be really difficult to do here in Wisconsin, as much as we have seen through polls that the majority of Wisconsinites do support the access to legal abortion. So I'm going to pause there for a moment. Again, I'm sorry I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of the really specific legal questions. But for those of you in the room, if you have specific legal questions, please write them down on your 3x5. And anyone on the Zoom, please add your questions to the chat. And then Michelle is going to be answering questions for us to make sure that we are giving you accurate legal interpretation. And you want me to keep going straight on? Or any initial thoughts? Yeah.
If you have a question, raise your hand.
Perfect. Any initial questions or thoughts just that I can try to respond to right now from the legal side? Yes.
Just very basic. I'm confused, and I heard this on the news too, that infanticide versus consensual abortion. Could you just flesh that?
Yeah. So the only time that the 94004 has been used to prosecute someone I believe it was about 30 years ago, there was a case where a partner assaulted his pregnant wife. And it led to the loss of that pregnancy at 38 weeks, so very close to a term pregnancy. The initial charge, there was question of whether 94004 was applied in that case or not. It actually ended up going to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, no, it did apply. 94004 applied to this case of feticide. So it's this idea of whether the pregnant patient is consenting to the ending of the pregnancy versus not. So because 94004 had previously been applied and stated to say that, yes, this applied to feticide, that is where the current judge is saying, no, this does not apply to consensual abortion. This is about non-consensual ending of a pregnancy. You're welcome. Yeah.
Can we write the questions down, please, and I'll collect them?
Okay. Write the question. Perfect. Yeah. And then
then I guess, yes, we'll have you start
go right
your
on.
presentation.
Okay, now I'm in my more familiar zone. So
Yeah.
moving on to the medical aspect. So I'm going to be talking about abortion facts and going through some of the more common myths that we see and hear about abortion in the public. So I want to, oh, it got turned on its side. Sorry about that. And actually, I'm going to skip past that just because we are at a nonpartisan event. I did not want to have any particular people up on the screen. But a lot of this came from a door hanger, I think Charlie had mentioned. And one of the things that was said on this door hanger was the idea of supporting abortion to the moment of birth. And what was the other one? I had it all blocked out, but there was one other statement. And so it was sort of inflammatory, really emotionally provoking ideas. So what I'm going to be focusing on are some of the most common myths that we see. I try to sort of put them into three areas. So first we see myths about who has abortions. Then we see myths about the risks and outcomes after having an abortion. And finally, we'll talk about fetal development and pain, because that's definitely something that we're seeing a lot of these days. So unintended pregnancy, you'll see a lot of my information here comes from the Guttmacher Institute. If you've never explored the Guttmacher website, I encourage you to check it out. It's a phenomenal organization. My last slide, I have a list of really trusted organizations that I would encourage you to feel confident and to feel free to explore to sort of, if you want some more information. But the Guttmacher Institute comes out with information on abortion in the United States as well as around the world, but they do every 3 years put out most recent information for the United States. So what I'm going to be presenting here is a sort of a combination of all of the Q3 year data, depending on what they've released at this point. So in the United States, about half of pregnancies overall are unintended, and about 42% of unintended pregnancies end in abortion. So one thing I want to mention here, when we are talking about the word abortion, it really depends on what setting we're talking about. So if you're in the hospital with me, abortion just means ending of a pregnancy. So there is spontaneous abortion, which is the medical term for miscarriage. There is induced abortion, which is what we more commonly think of as a consensual abortion or someone asking to end a pregnancy. There's threatened abortion, where someone might be having bleeding in early pregnancy. There's missed abortion, where someone has a miscarriage, but their body hasn't recognized it yet. So this word abortion, it's really important when you're talking about abortion to try to narrow down what you're actually talking about. So in more common areas in society, when we use the word abortion, most people are talking about therapeutic or induced abortion. People asking or needing to end a pregnancy by choice rather than for, spontaneous reasons or it happening on its own. Does that make sense? So when I'm talking about abortion here, when Guttmacher is talking about abortion, we're usually talking about induced abortion specifically. So people having a termination for whatever reason, whether there's a medical indication, social indication, etc. We are not talking about spontaneous abortions or miscarriages here. In 2020, about 1 in 5 pregnancies ended in abortion. That is a slight increase from 2017, and I'll show you a graph in a second here. Numbers of rates of abortions have been consistently going down for years and years and years. And this 2020 data is the first time in many, many years that we did see a slight increase in the number of abortions. And that means that about 1 in 4 people with uteruses or women will have an abortion by age 45. So a large number of people have had abortions. So again, this is that graph. This is from 2017. You can see this really consistent downward trend. And then this is the most recent data from 2020. So you see this very slight uptick on the far right-hand side, where we went from 13.5 to 14.4 abortions per 1,000 women. So who has abortions? There's this stereotype that only young and irresponsible people choose abortion. So I'm sure you have seen this, or I'm sure you have heard insinuations that this is true. This is just simply not true. So if we look at who has abortions, we know that most patients have had a prior delivery. Most patients who have abortions are mothers. Most patients have been or are married, the majority of people. Most patients are young, with about 60% of them being in their 20s. The majority of people who have abortions are white from a racial background. I don't know why my formatting is just a little strange here. But on the other side, I can tell you most patients who have abortions are poor. The majority of people live below the federal poverty level. The majority of people who have abortions identify religiously, whether that is Catholic, Protestant, Christian of some kind. Most people identify religiously. And the majority of people who have abortions are using contraception at the time that they are seeking an abortion. So they were trying to prevent a pregnancy, and for whatever reason, that contraception did not work, or they found out about a diagnosis after the fact. When are most people having abortions? This is really important, and I'm going to come back to this several times, especially when we go into the fetal development side of things. The vast majority of people are having abortions in the first trimester, with the majority of those happening within the first 8 weeks. So about 65% in the first 8 weeks of pregnancy. In the, as far as abortion options, prior to 11 weeks, both medication abortion as well as procedural abortion, or DNC, are available. I want to point out medication abortion is really where a lot of the focus is right now. Medication abortion, and I have a slide coming up in just a moment here, is growing exponentially. We are seeing a lot of patients, or a lot of people who choose to manage their own abortion in their home. And that's important, especially when we're also trying to figure out numbers. More people that are self-managing their abortions, the little bit harder it's going to be to figure out how many abortions are actually occurring. So it's just important to sort of realize that some of our data might be a little bit more foggy as we move forward, now that medication abortions are the majority of procedures that are being performed. After 11 weeks, usually people are having a procedural abortion, also known as a dilation evacuation. And after about 24 to 26 weeks, it's usually going to be an induction of labor. Medication abortion, just a quick note on this, it's a combination of two medications. I'm sure you've heard a lot about mifepristone. If people have questions about mifepristone, we can certainly talk about that. But right now, the preferred regimen is a combination of mifepristone and misoprostol, which people take at home. And this is just that number. I mean, there's very few things in medicine that you see this huge drastic switch, this huge change. So very, very big shift to more and more medication abortions compared to procedural abortions. This is definitely an area where pregnant people are choosing to seek out their care, where they can have that process in their own home rather within the traditional medical setting. Dilation and curettage is the procedure that occurs in the first trimester. Just important to realize the vast majority of abortions take place in freestanding clinics, not in hospitals. Usually patients are either having just local lidocaine in their cervix to help with pain, or there's options for IV or oral analgesia and sedation. Usually it's about 5 minutes. Abortions are very fast. They do not take a lot of time, and patients are usually go home after about 30 minutes. And the vast majority of patients do not need any follow-up care. Let's talk about the risks of having an abortion. So these posters, I see these all over, especially outside of our clinics. The idea that abortion is terrifying, it is scary, it's going to impact the rest of your life. The fact is that current abortion methods are incredibly safe. The risk of having a complication of a first trimester abortion is 0.05%. Abortion is typically up to 14 times safer than continuing a pregnancy to term. So really important when we're talking to pregnant patients and when they're trying to think about things, especially when they're thinking about the risks of continuing a pregnancy if they have a medical condition. Abortion is safe, especially in the first trimester. There is no long-term risk to fertility or future pregnancies. Very common belief. I had patients asking me today, does this mean that I'm not going to be able to have a pregnancy in the future? I tell every patient that no, when it's your time, if you decide that you want to become pregnant again, my expectation is that you have a completely normal and healthy pregnancy. There is no association between abortion and breast cancer or any other cancer. There are multiple states where doctors are actually forced to tell patients that there is an association, despite data time and time again saying that there is not an association between abortion and any cancer. There is no negative impact on long-term mental health, no increased risk of depression, suicide, anxiety. The most common emotion that patients express is relief. And it's actually when they have a study called the Turnaway study where they compared patients that wanted an abortion that weren't able to have it versus those that were able to have it. And we actually see much higher rates of stress and anxiety in those that were denied their abortion. And the vast majority of patients do not regret their decision. At 5-year follow-up studies, 95% of people say that it was the right decision for them. Lastly, I want to talk about fetal development and pain. Again, this is a very common sort of picture or theme that we see. These types of pictures are super misleading. This is a full-term, fully grown baby that then they have a fake umbilical cord attached to, right? So this is really, really emotionally provoking. And that is really the intent of a lot of these ads or approaches. So I'm going to show you this, and I think that this is really surprising to a lot of people. 2/3 of abortions, as I mentioned, take place at 8 weeks or less. This is what the pregnancy looks like. I am totally honest. This is what I saw all day today. And I think that this is something that a lot of people don't realize. When we're talking about 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, where the vast majority of pregnancies are happening, there is nothing recognizable here. I oftentimes will have patients that ask to see their tissue. And in the first trimester, I'm super happy that they asked, because a lot of times people are expecting this little tiny baby. That's not what it is. So I think that this is a really powerful sort of example for people to realize this is what the tissue looks like at this point. Why do we have this misconception of what the tissue looks like? A couple reasons. So sources of confusion. One is this idea of gestational duration. So when we talk about pregnancies, there's 2 ways of talking about pregnancies. We sometimes refer from a last menstrual period, and sometimes we talk about the date of conception. Back in the day, we did not have ultrasounds, right? So we dated everything from someone's last menstrual period. On average, a last menstrual period is going to be 2 weeks further along than when someone actually became pregnant. So if you look at laws, if you're talking to people and they're talking about a gestational age, really important to try to narrow down, are you talking about a last menstrual period or are you talking about conception? As big as something in Wisconsin, our 20-week ban. We have a 20-week ban in the state of Wisconsin. It's 20 weeks post-conception. So that means 22 weeks last menstrual period. So that's one source of confusion. So you can see there, when I'm saying 5 weeks, that actually means 3 weeks post-conception. These little models, these fetal models are very, very common. You can buy these online. This is supposed to represent 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks after conception. You can see that is just not accurate. And especially when our patients are going to a crisis pregnancy center or various centers where they might be trying to dissuade them from having an abortion, they're very frequently handed these models and said, this is what's inside you right now. And that can be really concerning and confusing for patients, especially when I then later show them the tissue. These are really common. So a lot of people who are celebrating the fact that they are pregnant and are excited about their pregnancy, they might use these, how big is our baby at this time? They most commonly will compare it to seeds and fruits. And if you look at these same gestational ages, they talk about blueberries, raspberries, green olives. Again, this can be really deceiving when patients then see the actual tissue or what they're anticipating seeing. And then finally, ultrasound. Our ultrasounds are really, really powerful these days. We can zoom way in on pictures. We can measure things. We can see really early detail, but that is not what you're going to be seeing with the naked eye. So I think all of this can add to a lot of the confusion and a lot of the sort of controversy when we're talking about early trimester abortions. So a lot of times, again, when patients ask me to see the tissue after their procedure, the most common thing that they say is, you're kidding? Like, that's all it is? They're oftentimes very reassured when they see the actual tissue. These are 2 articles from The Guardian as well as the New York Times that, again, emphasize this idea of early abortion and what patients are actually seeing. The last thing that I want to talk about is fetal pain. So this is a big, big topic right now. The idea that we need to be restricting abortion out of concern for fetal pain. This is from an ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They put out a statement in 2021. There's a huge list of sources cited in this, as well as the original studies. I'm going to hit the main point. A human fetus does not have the capacity to experience pain until at least 24 to 25 weeks. Every major medical organization agrees with that. The connections just literally do not exist until that 24 to 25 week point. That said, there's even a question of whether, even when those connections exist, is there a possibility to experience pain? And a lot of scientists have said, experience of pain actually requires more than the actual, just the connections, right? And the sensation of pain requires you to have a consciousness to understand the difference between touch versus pain. So the majority of scientists actually say that they don't feel that fetal pain is likely present until the later third trimester. So earliest 24 to 25 weeks, and quite possibly even later than that. One thing that I emphasize to patients, movement does not equal pain. So we all have reflexes. Fetuses also have reflexes. And the idea that we give anesthesia for fetal procedures, we do give anesthesia, but a lot of time it's the idea to have everything stay still. It's not because we're concerned about pain in those areas. So I'm going to go back to the original door hanger on the top right-hand side. So it was this idea of supporting abortion measures or Abortion Until Birth Act, and the idea of medical care to babies born alive after failed abortions. These are these really extremist, intentionally, emotionally provoking and controversial statements that people are trying to bring up to sort of push people away from the medical facts about abortion. What I want to emphasize is being against a gestational age ban does not mean that I believe in abortion until birth. And being against a Born Alive Act does not mean that I support infanticide. We are focusing on the medicine, right? Anytime that you create these gestational age bans, you're taking medicine out of the clinic room and you're putting these restrictions on it that are never going to be able to encompass all of the exceptions and all the nuances of medicine. So the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology will not commit to a gestational age where they say after this point, abortion, it should be banned. And the reason why is that is not where we should be deciding these things. It should be in the clinic room with the patient and their physician thinking of the individual situation. So again, I just want to emphasize, you'll hear a lot of debates, especially as we get into politics season, of this idea of, well, you don't support a certain gestational age ban. Well, that means that you're going to rip the baby from the womb the day before birth. No, 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 no. That does not happen. That is not medically accurate. The reason we are not supporting gestational age bans is that it is not ever going to be able to have all the nuances and intricacies that we need from a medical perspective. Those are my slides. These are the evidence-based resources, but I'd be happy to take a couple questions here and then we'll save the rest towards the end. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, yeah. Okay, what do you attribute the rate increase after 2017? I think it's really multifactorial. I think that we are absolutely seeing more and more restrictions occurring. And any time that you're talking about restrictions, you're talking about access, right? So I think that even though the idea of restricting abortion would make you think that, oh, well, that means that abortion rates should go down. That's not what we see. Even post-Dobbs, we have not seen a decrease in abortion. I can tell you that after Dobbs, I had patients coming to me saying, I wish I had more time to think about this. I'm not sure it's the right decision for me, but I'm so afraid that I'm not going to have the choice that I want an abortion now, right? And that's really scary because my whole goal is to make sure that people are making the decision that's right for them. So I think that it's multifactorial. I don't have a great sense. I don't know whether this trend is going to continue. I think if we continue to see this trend from 2017 to 2020, we should have the 2023 data sometime in the next year or so. Then I think we have to sort of look at our contraception. We know that access to contraception, the contraceptive mandate has been challenged in several areas. Whether people are still having the access to contraception they need, I think it's tricky. So I don't have a perfect one-word answer for why the rate might be going up. What attributed to the decline before 2017? Same thing. I think probably multifactorial. I think overwhelmingly what we saw there is a huge increase in the number of patients that were choosing LARC, or long-acting reversible contraceptives. So implants and IUDs, very, very effective forms of birth control that you set it and forget it, right? So they can last anywhere from 5 to 12 years and people don't have to think about it. And they are very cost effective and they sometimes have really favorable side effects. So I would say that, as well as the greater coverage for contraception, were two of the main things that we felt was likely driving that decline in abortion rates. And then why are unintended pregnancies so high, 45%? I think, again, multifactorial. I think it's a lot of different things. I think access to contraception is important. Access to education. We do not have comprehensive sex ed in the state of Wisconsin. We don't have specific, requirements for comprehensive sex ed in the state of Wisconsin, and that is true in many, many states. I think access and decreasing stigma around contraception is also really important. Talking about sex is really important. So yeah, I could have lots and lots of thoughts for many, many hours about all of these things, but I think it's a lot of different things intertwining. Perfect. We'll do one more now. Can I elaborate on the specifics of some of the details around expanding abortion care access in the future? Yes. So from the legal side, it really is trying to look at all of those restrictions that Wisconsin had before the Dobbs decision as well, all the things that we're practicing under right now. So things that don't seem like at first hearing it, you'd be like, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. A 24-hour waiting period is a really big deal, right? That requires people to come to 2 separate appointments. If you live up in Green Bay and you have to come down and see me in Milwaukee, go all the way home and then come back. The other thing is 24 hours is rarely 24 hours. So in order to see the same physician, sometimes you're going to be waiting 2 weeks between appointments. All of these things decrease access. A ban on telemedicine. Again, what we're seeing with these medication abortion numbers rising is that people like that idea of convenience, of access, greater control. If I have a ban on telemedicine, I can't do that for my patients. If I have a same physician law, I can't do that for my patients. And also realizing that we need to expand the number of providers. So all of the services right now in Wisconsin are centered in the South, in Milwaukee and Madison. That's it right now. So if you are in the entire northern part of the state, you do not have access. So we need more providers. One of the ways that I think we can do that is by removing the physician-only law. Right now, physicians are the only ones who can provide abortion care in the state of Wisconsin. In Illinois, my nurse practitioners can provide it. That is a huge increase in access. So it's really trying to sort of tackle some of those specific restricting laws that have decreased access, trying to dismantle those or decrease them as much as we're able to, in addition to working towards a hopeful constitutional right to abortion in the state of Wisconsin. Okay, one more quick one.
I think we should go on to Tia.
Okay.
And we'll answer them at the end. Yeah, because we don't have good time. Thank you.
This is my addiction.
With that many questions, you know it's a good presentation. So we're going to move on to Tia Reiner, she, her, and she serves as the Advocacy and Outreach Program Manager at Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Her path started with a degree in social work, focusing on child welfare and youth mental health. She now leads the Psychological Advocacy Training Program for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. She is training staff, volunteers, and partner organizations like us to build stronger advocates for reproductive freedom, one conversation at a time. And so what Tia is going to do is going to go through of how we can effectively have conversations on this topic. So please welcome Tia Reiner.
There we go. Okay, great. Thank you to Dr. Werner and Dr. Linton. Dr. Werner
Thank you for sharing your story. Stories have power, and I will touch on that in our brief time together. And we need to be grounded in knowledge in order to, often folks feel like I need to be an expert in order to have these conversations. So I'm here to say you don't need to be an expert, because Dr. Linton can't be in every room at every dinner table with your family having these conversations. So we really want to be in the community and share this with the community so that you feel comfortable starting these conversations. I am going to share what is a crash course in the way that we have conversations at Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin about sticky topics, about abortion, about reproductive health. Other people in our organization will say thanks. That was really helpful for my Thanksgiving discussion when that thing came up. So it's applicable in other places. But we have these conversations because we know that reproductive health is not black and white. For most of us, maybe we feel really strongly in one way, and the general population of people have questions. They have concerns, they have conflict, and we want folks to feel comfortable starting these conversations. So, a brief overview on how the way we have conversations at Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin is a bit different than traditional advocacy. So at Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, we call our advocacy approach 3D, or the conversational approach. But to start with traditional advocacy, if we're taking that approach, we generally believe we are right. We have the right idea, and the other people on the other side are just wrong. And we just need to fix that so that we can all move forward together. That usually starts with having a debate or pushing our ideas, or pushing our values, or if we are running an organization, sometimes we think, if we put enough billboards up, if we throw enough ads up, and we say the same thing over and over, eventually people will change their mind. They'll get with the program. Here's the reality, for most people, when they get pushed like that, if they have some conflict, if they have some questioning, that tends to leave a nice opening for another side to say, hey, we see that you're not sure about this. You've got some questions. Well, those abortion advocates over there are pushing their side, and there's no room for you in that. So come to this side. You must be with us. So it's not that simple, but that's what happens. Where 3D or the conversational approach differs, 3D, we call it 3D because we are talking about being three-dimensional. Traditional advocacy is we put billboards up, we put door hangers up, we put a radio ad on, and the idea is people will listen and hopefully they will change. Three-dimensional advocacy is about being engaged. It is about having conversations, not debates, and acknowledging that people do have conflict, that things aren't as black and white as we would like them to be, and figuring out how we can start by finding common ground. So a quick note on who this is for and who this is not for, because this is really an important part of this, because I don't want anyone to walk away from this and say, well, she told me I should go just to exercise my best listening skills with that person yelling outside a house. That is not it. Who this is for. We think about using this approach when we are talking to probably lots of folks like you in this room who are supportive of reproductive freedom, and we want to feel confident. We want to be quote unquote louder. I'm not saying run around with a megaphone, but we want you talking to your people. So it's for those conversations. This is also for what we in advocacy world would consider a movable middle. So people who maybe have some conflict around abortion, have some questions, This is also for people who we know we have some shared values with, but we're not talking to. So when I say that, I'm thinking about ways in which for Planned Parenthood as an organization might find a partner or a good working relationship with other organizations focused on healthcare. We have probably some common ground to start from around wanting communities to be healthy. So with all of that, who this is not for the folks who will stand outside of Planned Parenthood and yell at our patients. The reality is folks like that have a really rigid mindset and are unlikely to change. So with that, I just want to keep in mind, it's not for those conversations, and most people do not live in that space, do not live in the space of having a very rigid mindset on this issue. So, as was previously mentioned in my introduction, this approach is rooted in applied psychology. Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin has actually been working with a psychologist on and off for about a decade, who has been a fantastic mentor to me. And so I am going to give a few examples and cover what we call things to know about humans, but really are the psychological pillars of how we have these conversations. And here's the first one. It involves changing ourselves. So maybe the idea of changing yourself is not the way you go into advocacy. Most of us probably go into advocacy or having a conversation thinking, I just need to change them. I'm here to change them. What could I possibly have to change about myself? So this is where we are already diverging. But if take a moment to consider when you are having a conversation instead of a debate, and the idea of using this approach, we take the idea of making the ensuring that the conversation goes well, not that we are there to win. Winning feels really good. I know it does. I know it. And think about if you are in a debate and you, as the advocate for abortion access, win. You walk away from that conversation saying, oof, I got them. I caught them in that piece of, misinformation, and I win. What have we accomplished? We probably accomplished that person walking away saying, well, I'm never going to talk to her again. Yeah. Or we're definitely not going to bring up birth control at the dinner table anymore because that didn't feel like a good idea. So when I say focusing on a conversation going well, I think a great example is really early on in my career at Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, I was meeting with a pastor, and I didn't know this person at all. All I knew is they ran a large church here in Milwaukee. I didn't know how they felt about Planned Parenthood. So our CEO, Tanya, came along with me, and we're sitting in a coffee shop, and I'm super nervous. And yeah, I'm talking to this pastor, and our CEO is there, and I turned to her and I said, what are you hoping we get out of this? And she said, I'm hoping we have a second conversation. And I was just like, oh, what a relief. Because I went into that conversation realizing we could talk about the healthcare that he saw a need for in his church's community. Turns out they really need breast cancer screenings, and that's something we found some common ground on. We found some common ground on just meeting community need. And I didn't have to walk away with him saying, yep, I'm gonna go stick that Planned Parenthood sign in the front yard in front of our church. And we've continued to have conversation. So with that, skip our assumptions, but I want to talk about triggers. So most of politics is really good at stirring up these strong emotions like fear or anger. We are here tonight because someone got a door hanger that had some pretty strong statements on it. Probably for the first person who picked that up off their door and then showed it to the next person, probably pretty angry, probably pretty outraged. Politics, traditional politics, super good at doing that for us. When we are thinking about staying in conversation and away from debate, we want to think about how can I manage my own triggers? How can I do that for myself? So that might look like some deep breaths, because actually, you know, as a psychology aside, you're sending your brain a little message when you take long, slow, deep breaths that actually, I am okay. Actually, I am not in danger. No one's going to attack me in this conversation. I'm here to be in conversation. Managing triggers might also look like pausing. If you've ever been in a heated debate in your household and someone says something really nasty and then you say something really nasty right back, that's usually because we haven't paused to think about, ooh, do I really feel that way? So we think about pausing, and we're doing all of that so that we can stay listening, so that we can stay empathetic. And in order to use this approach that we use at Planned Parenthood, we have to be engaged and genuinely listen. And that means not just waiting your turn to speak. That means truly listening to someone. And when we define empathy in an advocacy setting, I define it as the ability to work to understand another person's perspective. It does not mean that you agree. So I can step into someone's shoes. I can hear their story. It does not mean that I have to take on those values. It does not mean that I have to agree, but I have to work to do it. I'll just say also with that empathy and listening piece, this is where we get curious. So what that looks like in real conversation is maybe literally saying, I'm curious. I'm curious what you know about Planned Parenthood. Or when someone shares some misinformation, you know, it sounds like you know a bit about abortion access in Wisconsin. Tell me more about what you know. And the tone with which that comes is really important, and the intention. I am genuinely curious. I would like to know where you heard that, what else you know, so that we can have a conversation. So next thing is acknowledging conflicted feelings. Here's the reality. Conflicted feelings are normal. Maybe you have some conflict about like whether you're going to eat your sad salad in the refrigerator or if you're going to go get some takeout with your coworkers. You know, some things that I may have experienced today. But to go back, that empathy piece is really important when we're talking to people with conflicted feelings. Our goal using this approach is to be able to acknowledge that conflict exists and normalize that. Sometimes for me, that sounds like literally saying those words, you know, I know that this can be hard. I know that this isn't a straightforward issue. And being able then to model maybe how you have sorted through conflict, or the ability to hold two views at the same time. So that modeling sorting through conflict might sound like, I know talking about abortion can be a sticky subject. I have heard from other people, you know, that, you know, if someone shares misinformation, I think it's, I've shared, you know, when someone says, I think to go back to like, who has abortions? I hear a lot of like, well, if those college girls didn't just, you know, X, Y, Z, I can say, you know, talking about abortion is really complex and you're not the first person I've heard that from before. Can I share with you what I've learned or what I know? And also sorting through conflict, I think most often where I experience this is when folks are sharing about religion. And sorting through a conflict that comes up when their religious values feel counter to supporting someone having access to abortion. So if we're thinking about that kind of conflict, this is my own story. I encourage you all to take a little time to think about how you might share this. But when someone brings up conflict around religion, I say, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing, first of all. Someone being willing to share, hey, I know you might support this, and I don't know how I feel about it. That's vulnerable. So being able to say, you know, I appreciate you sharing. For me, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I have lots of family members who grew up Catholic. And I know I have seen both for myself and for my family members how it's been a journey to sort through our feelings, because some of the things that we were taught in the church feel really counter to supporting people having access to abortion. And for me, I often think about my aunt, who is someone who is devoted to her faith. She's active in her church, and she strongly supports a person's ability to choose their own medical care, because she thinks and believes that it's not her place to judge. So thinking about how we can model for people that there are other people who have sorted through conflict. This is not as straightforward as political ads would like to make it out to be. And then the last thing I want to share about is finding shared values. If we are going to have conversations and not debates, we need to look for points of connection. It's really easy to start a debate from I am right and you are wrong and let's go. When you're having a conversation, you want to find maybe at the very base level. I think about very base level shared values that we have. Most people believe in helping those in need. Most people believe in wanting to make their own medical decisions, or the medical decisions that are best for their family. Most people want their community to be healthy. If we're talking about teens and sex ed, most people want teens to have accurate information and a trusted adult to go to. So thinking about where can we start that is common ground, and then we can go forward. But if we start from where we disagree, we've probably already lost someone. So with that, when we first started this, Charlie and I talked about including some interaction in our evening. And so I know this was a crash course, but I like engagement. This is not the talking, lecturing is not my thing. So we are going to practice just for a few brief moments, having some conversations, thinking about with the intent of having a conversation and not a debate. I know that this can feel daunting, and I lead trainings all day, and I also know that when people practice, they work out the kinks, they feel more confident, they are okay saying that thing that they're like, oh okay, I'm not going to take that route again. So in a moment, I am going to ask you to find a partner in the room to practice a sticky conversation. There are little blue cups on your table that have some prompts of either sticky conversations or misinformation in them. But before we do that, I want you to hold some things in mind from what we've talked about this evening. So first, remembering to listen and get curious. I know I talked about being triggered and some things that we can think about to slow ourselves down when someone makes a statement that can feel really triggering. And with that, focusing on how can we pause and remember that conflicted feelings are okay. So I want to be able to model for you all just the power of sharing a journey with folks. So that might sound like, to go back to the teens and sex ed, maybe my background is in social work. I spent a lot of time with teenagers, and I can say with full honesty, you know what? At one point in time, I was really worried too about talking to teenagers about sex and giving them condoms and what that would result in. The fear that this might mean that they might have more sex. And now what I know is actually that means that they are going to have safe sex. If they're going to have sex, and now that they have knowledge to make those decisions. So thinking about where can we find common ground, and where can we stay in conversation. So with that, here's the setup. I'm going to ask you to do two things. One, find a partner, not just yet. Two, you are going to grab a slip of paper from the cup that is in front of you. And one of you is going to practice, and the other person is going to read the maybe triggering statement. And your goal is to stay in conversation. This is going to be very brief. You're going to get 3 minutes to practice, and then I'm going to ask you to switch, and the other person is going to practice. And then we'll come back together. With that, does anyone have any questions? Is it the same card? Each person will pick the card. There are all different options in there. So you could practice the same one, or you could ask your partner to try something else. So please find a partner. I'm going to grab my timer and we'll let you get to it.
Hello. Thanks for joining. My help was that I was the only one in the room.
Oh, let me move you. I'll move you to a different room. Thank you.
So you can put me somewhere else, okay? I look forward to connecting with you all in Milwaukee. I'm actually working with a clinic there.
Absolutely. I know the room in here is pretty loud, so I'm going to get you connected to a different room. Give me one second.
No problem.
Thank you.
You.
All right, back together. I hope everyone enjoyed their conversation. Sometimes they make people clap. I think we should try that tonight. No? Okay, clap once if you hear my voice. Twice if you hear my voice. All right, okay, we're back together. I won't go a third time. Okay, so I hope everyone had at least productive conversation or an enjoyable conversation with your neighbor. I just want to take a moment and ask folks, I usually ask for successes and glitches, things that you think went well or things that really stumped you. Anyone, or also offer up things that you think your partner did really well. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
I had this statement that said about abortion being legal until birth. And I was told, I said, you know, I heard this is being done and I think it's horrible. And I just don't think that's right. And she said, I would think that's horrible too. But I don't think that's what's happening, you know, and so she empathized with me and agreed with me. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Most of us want to protect pregnant people and to protect children. Absolutely. We wouldn't want, that's a great response. Yeah. Any other successes and glitches? Go ahead.
I think a really difficult thing to overcome is stereotypes. We had a question that was, I grew up Catholic, so I did something how I could support abortion, which got into other topics too. But when you're triggered by something, your emotions just rise up out of nowhere, and I think it's probably the hardest thing to deal with in a conversation. These stereotypical kind of triggering statements that the other person is facing. I think that's just take a power.
I absolutely, I think that's a glitch for most people. And here's the other thing. I shared a few statements when I was presenting about, you know, just the idea of how we can model other people's journeys through conflicted feelings or model our own journey, or we call it holding the tension of opposites in psychology, the ability to hold to think both and. So I can value my faith and be a devout Catholic, and I can support abortion access. That's a hard place for a lot of people to get to. And the other thing I want to say is we use this approach when I talk about using this approach, talk about planting seeds. My goal is not to change someone's mind in a single conversation. If that happened, that'd probably be a miracle. And then I'd have some other religious things to add to the mix. And people, even if you have one conversation with them and you're never going to see them again, people keep thinking. They do not operate in a vacuum. They go home and tell their partner, hey, I, talked to this woman today about this thing, or hey, I saw this thing. We do it all the time. Let me tell you what I heard. Let me tell you what I saw. People keep thinking even after we've spoken with them. And that's why when I talk about making sure a conversation goes well, ideally people say, okay, I had a conversation about abortion and no one yelled, and I don't hate that person at the end of it. That's a win for us. Yeah. Anything else that folks want to look at?
I would say the 3 P's, and this comes from a group called Starts With Us. Compassion, curiosity, and courage. And Kia, you have modeled that.
Thank you. Yes. So I will just share and I'll make sure that the link gets to you all later. But this was a crash course in this training. If you'd like to do this training with PPWI, we're gonna have one online on Zoom in 2 weeks. So I'll make sure that that link gets shared out. Otherwise, we're always happy. Spend a lot of time at church groups and in people's living rooms. Always happy to take a deeper dive. So thank you.
Well, thank you all. Now, do we have additional questions that need to be addressed? Because we did promise that. And then Tia, how long is that deeper dive? Like, what is the time?
2 hours.
2 hours. Perfect. And so besides when we have online, we could invite you back and do that in the middle of winter when nobody has anything to do outside. Okay. Okie doke. Oh, this is, these are for Michelle. Is she here?
She is around. I can ask her.
Okay.
Do you want to read the first one?
Are there proposed you may know this, but are there proposed restrictions to access contraception in Wisconsin?
Not at the moment. Michelle, and if you can hear me, I'm about to call you on your cell phone, put you on speakerphone. Can you hear the question? Okay, I'm gonna put you on speakerphone so you can answer. Okay, you are on speakerphone.
Okay, hi everyone. So no, there are not any current proposed restrictions to contraception in Wisconsin.
Michelle, are you able to mute your Zoom?
Yeah, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So no current restrictions to contraception in Wisconsin.
Right, but I guess I would highlight that one proposal that comes up routinely is restricting state Medicaid patients from using Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, essentially, because it restricts the use of state Medicaid funds even for family planning services at an abortion provider. So that while it doesn't restrict contraception, it does restrict people's access to a pretty big provider of family planning and contraception services in Wisconsin.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And there is another question. What is the rationale behind the same physician law? So probably the physician law that you outlined that has like a lot of consequences.
Yeah, so Michelle, I can tackle this, but I have you up to my ear if you want to add anything. So it's access. I mean, to be really clear, I think that this is one of the most creative laws that I have heard from the anti-side. I trained in Chicago, and when I came up here, this one is very sneaky. The idea that you have to see the same physician specifically for medication abortion. For a procedural abortion, you don't have to see the same physician. You can see any physician. But for medication abortion specifically, you have to see the same physician. There is no medical reason for this whatsoever. But if you think about what that means for access, especially for medication abortion, where otherwise I could be dispensing it from a pharmacy or from a telemedicine office or any of the above, having you have to see the same physician in person is a great way to decrease access and to make it really tricky for patients. So that was one of the challenges that Planned Parenthood's prior lawsuit was trying to challenge. Michelle, do you have anything to add there?
Medication abortion has become really important point of access, and by requiring it the same physician. Oh, I have to unmute on my computer. That's way better. Sorry. By requiring the same physician, it really restricts people from accessing medication abortion, which accounts for over 50% of all abortions nationally, but Wisconsin is actually lower. And I think it is the same physician requirement because, you know, when we're thinking about more rural areas, it is harder to, there are just fewer physicians available in rural areas, sort of just generally. And so by requiring the same physician, it really, in my mind, is aimed at restricting access to that increasing use of medication abortion, and in rural areas more specifically.
Can I ask a question? So in rural areas, will family medicine physicians prescribe medication abortions? Or do they really leave it to you all at Planned Parenthood?
So there's no medical reason why a family physician cannot provide medication abortion. In order to provide mifepristone, which is that more restricted of the two medications, you have to sign a prescriber provider agreement, and you have to submit that to the two companies that sell mifepristone in the country. And then you have to follow certain regulations. But any physician, any prescriber can actually do that. The majority of prescribers do not. And I think that that is really, it comes back to the idea of stigma. There are a lot of physicians, whether they are prohibited by the entity that they work for, a lot of physicians are restricted, or providers are restricted based on who they work for whether they can provide medication or not. But also from society, there are a lot of people that are concerned about providing medication abortion and what that means for their practice, whether they're going to have protesters at their door. But there's no medical reason why any prescriber cannot become a certified prescriber and provide the medication in the state. I will say, again, in Wisconsin, we do have a physician-only law. So here it would have to be a physician, but in other states, nurse practitioners, et cetera, could provide as well.
Are there any questions that we have not gotten to?
Can I ask a question about, Senator Beloit has recommended like an Instagram post that people can purchase a medical abortion pill from another country, store it in your medicine cabinet. I wonder if you have any thoughts about what she was talking about.
Yes. Yep. So the question is, I can never say it. Royce, Kelda Royce, had mentioned the idea of getting abortion pills and storing them in your cabinet and having them for future use. So Michelle, I'll take a stab and then you can add on here. But the main idea, self-managed abortion is safe. It is effective. The majority of pharmacies where you can get these medications, the majority of them are overseas. So things like Aid Access and Plan C are websites where you can get medications. The one thing to be aware of, so we cannot have, based on, well, we are not allowed to send medications within the state due to our own laws. Someone from Illinois can't send into Wisconsin. But what I will say, it's important when you're thinking about those medications self-managing. There are no laws in Wisconsin that charge the person that is managing their own abortion. The only person at risk of any of these laws is the physician or the provider. But it's really important, if I buy those medications and I give them to my daughter or I give them to a friend, there is a risk there. There's a potential risk that you could be seen as the person who is providing the abortion. So there's a lot of just stuff there. I would agree. I would love for Miffy and Meso to be available in every drugstore across the country. But there's a little bit of legal intricacy that you need to be thinking about. Michelle, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you covered it. It's important, you know, as you mentioned, that legal intricacies, and even prior to Dobbs, our own medication abortion laws required physician only, and anyone who didn't follow all of the law around medication abortion was subject to a Class I felony charge. So that's really important to keep in mind. But again, self-managed abortion, you know, the person who is pregnant and wanting to end their pregnancy, purchasing these pills, and self-managing, that is not criminalized in Wisconsin. But there can always be other sort of tangential legal consequences for someone to think about. And that's why these really reputable websites like Plan C and Aid Access also have legal reproductive health lines to help kind of guide people through whatever legal questions they might have about it.
That's very interesting information. Thank you. And thank you, Michelle, for making yourself available to us. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah,
Learn a question on the chat.
yes.
Maybe next to choose a little closer, you want to example?
Is there good data about what the most likely outcomes are for children born to mothers who were not able to obtain an abortion that they wanted? Abortion or adoption, foster care, raised by a mother or other family member, etc.
Yeah. So there's a really large study out of UCSF called the Turnaway Study, and I would encourage all of you to look it up. They've got a nice little summary of the main findings that they found, and this is where they followed people. They're out past a couple decades now, looking at what happens if someone presents and then they're turned away for whatever reason, and they both look at the pregnant patient as well as their children. And what happens to that child. And there are poor health outcomes, there are poor mental health outcomes, and there's poor socioeconomic outcomes for both the pregnant person and their children. But I would encourage you to look up the Turnaway Study out of UCSF. Interestingly, they are also doing a new version of the Turnaway Study post-Dobbs. So looking at people who are wanting an abortion before the Dobbs decision came down, and then following them if they were not able to receive their abortion. So more data in the future.
Yes, in Wisconsin, if a physician provides a prescription for medication abortion, is it difficult to fill that prescription as in rural areas?
Yes. So the question was whether if a physician prescribes medication, for medication abortion in Wisconsin, is it difficult to fill? So for mifepristone, the one medication, it is only available if you have a prescriber agreement. So that is not available from pharmacies in Wisconsin right now. There was a move to
so you're not divided as
you are getting it from a physician's office. Exactly. So there was a move to remove one of the, so this is, the mifepristone is under a special restriction of the FDA called a REMS medication. So it has additional restrictions on it. There was a move to allow pharmacies to prescribe mifepristone, and in some states they are, but in Wisconsin that came down just before Dobbs. There are no pharmacies in Wisconsin right now that are providing mifepristone. For misoprostol, which is the second of the medications and the medication that you can use by itself, but it's not quite as effective. There's more side effects and it takes a lot longer. All pharmacies in Wisconsin right now are requiring a diagnosis. And if the diagnosis code is for a induced abortion, they will not fill it. If it is for a miscarriage, they will fill it. So yes, it's very tricky. So if a patient is getting medications from me for medication abortion, I make sure they go home with all the medications they will need.
Okey-doke. So what we're going to do is wrap up for tonight. I want to thank all the presenters. Dr. Linton graciously volunteered that she would stay a little bit late and answer further questions if someone has that. Since we're kind of running late, we'll hopefully be respectful to her time. But this was a great presentation. I learned so much from everyone. And so I want to thank everyone here at the League who supported this public issues forum. Certainly we could not have done it without Emily and Mary Ellen, who helped with registration, and all of my committee members. They've been a great asset. We do want to make you aware that we have created a nice resource list for you for this presentation that includes, I believe, many of the same resources that Dr. Linton has highlighted. So if when you go to have those conversations, you feel a little rusty on your knowledge, you can check it out there. There's also resources on how to have the conversation, as well as if you're interested in supporting organizations that are supporting reproductive health. And throughout the state of Wisconsin that you may want to support. And we always include how you can contact your state and representatives and senators as well, if you feel that you would like to discuss with them. We have provided, Gail has distributed an evaluation. Please, because we are looking forward to having more public issues forum. And this is the way that we learn if what would be of interest to you. So there's some thoughts amongst my committee that we would like to have either we would host or we would work in conjunction with other leagues throughout the state. Public issue forums on the impact of abortion bans, on the impact on physical, mental, and financial health of women. And also, we'd like to possibly explore what it takes for women to thrive, what would be the optimal public and social policy to help to support women and their families. Because really that would be what we all want to do, right? That's what Tia has taught us, that we want to find the common ground and how can we best support families who really want to have children. Because I think Dr. Linton, what they would say, many of the women, it's a financial decision. 60% of them, they have other children and they financially do not feel that they can afford another child. So if someone would like to have another child, I'd like to make that possible for them. So thank you all for joining us. You've been a great audience. Sorry we've run a little bit over time.
Thank you.